Hi, my name is Ananya. I am a dance artist. I thought of myself only as a live artist, as really loving life, the moment of live encounter with time, space, people in my dance before the pandemic. And then through the pandemic, I started working with Darren to figure out how might it be to catch moments in film. And I realized there are many different ways of choreography. Live choreography is entirely different from dance film choreography. As a dance artist, though, I feel myself in my, I feel my body intensely, and so much of processing of what has happened, the waiting, the looking at the fire, the looking at each other, looking at the people I love, walking with people in protests, it's all registers in my nerves and in my cellular consciousness. So I feel a lot of the nervous energy, the quick twitch muscles I've become highly conscious of how that works when I move now. And then when I slow down my breath, I really pay attention. I've learned to pay attention to the distinction between the quick twitch muscles and how long I can sustain a breath. I think the contrast between the two has become clearer or more sharp. I suppose I love collective processes. I mean, I love ensemble work. I never want to dance alone anyway. So this is exciting because there's so many disciplines represented. I love that. I will say that in terms of body and feet, dancing all through the time on uneven floors, on the public spaces, on the uneven ground that we rehearsed in on the parks, on my home floor, which is my tiny living room, knocking things over as I danced. I really recognize the difficulty. My feet register pain in much more sharp ways. Of course, we all really got a lot more older very fast through the 2 years. But I think a lot of wounds register in the soles of my feet. So I hold them a lot there. I thank you for inviting me to this process.
My name is Suzanne Victoria Cross. I don't even know where to start. I'm first just very overwhelmed to be in this circle. I feel so filled to be in this circle. I, in theater, have held lots of different disciplines and practices. Been a stage manager consistently for 6 years almost, 6 and 7 at Pangea World Theater, which has just been an incredible blessing. Also a performer, an actor, a teaching artist. More recently dabbling into writing or those things. So just a lot of different things navigating through theater that navigate through my body. But the first and foremost thing is just storytelling and just loving theater, and always been a storyteller since I was very little. And one of those biggest reasons I've always been a storyteller is because of my mother. I'll put her name in this space, Laurel Osterberg, which I also identify as her caregiver, provider. We kind of navigate different timelines together, weave through life together. And that's been one of the shifts. In these past 2 years, I've been her primary caregiver for, going on almost 9 years now. And since my mid-20s, I was kind of, all of a sudden, life just turns. She had a stroke, so everything just kind of changed overnight. What you were talking about earlier just really resonated with me. That position already is so isolating. Being a caregiver, especially at the age that I became a caregiver, just not really finding a lot of people who are aligned in that, and still having to work still having a partner that I'm dedicated to, still having like all of these things to pull, and then I'm just so blessed that I also then had theater as my ground and my anchor. So the past 2 years really navigating what is the intersections between now the isolation of being a caregiver, feeling this distance and isolation through my own artwork, through the pandemic and what that looks like. But one thing I think that's been so beautiful, just from my perspective, is the shift through the pandemic when it comes to technology, when it comes to access. I'm really hoping that we don't lose that, because this was the first time that my mother was able to see my work. Because she's wheelchair bound, she needs a lot of constant care, so kind of coming to the theater isn't really an option. But being able to have her see story circles that we did last year, and having her be able to see the education. She was a teacher for 46 years, so her seeing like her education panels and being able to create art and work with her has saved me through this. And that's kind of just a huge pulse of my work, and it kind of always has been, even before being a caregiver. Everyone on my block kind of knows this. Like as soon as, especially with the uprising and through COVID, we have a lot of, my family has owned kind of the house on our block since the 50s, and kind of everybody on my block is the same way. Where then the children then got the house, and now the grandchildren have the house, and there's a lot of elders on our block who then depend on, you know, the Walgreens for the medication. They depend on the grocery stores for their food. They have a whole system, and they can't deviate from that system, otherwise it's really confusing and really hard. So all of us younger people then were getting the meds, getting the food, getting the things, doing the storytelling, adding the laughter, adding the theater to our block, because we're on the north side, we were so isolated, again. So just all these layers of isolation. And if we didn't have community, if we didn't have art, if we didn't have just this way, I don't know if we would have made it through. So that's just my huge, huge part, and I was so honored to be able to be part of the Caregivers and Parents Story Circle, because it's just a huge part of my life, and I'm really honored to be here with all of you. So, thank you.
Hi everybody. I know of a lot of you, but haven't had a lot of conversations with you. But my name is Johanna Keller Flores. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a theater artist. I like to write plays. I like to perform. I like to stage manage with Suzanne. I will do whatever it takes for a show to be beautiful. The past couple of years, I don't know. I feel like I've gone through a million different ways of connecting and disconnecting from my creativity. I feel like I've had long periods of not wanting to create anything. I've had periods where I need to be alone. I've had periods where I've really craved to be with other people and to be doing things in community and in ensemble, and also not being able to get that. I am somebody who really has been craving collaborative work and ensemble work, I think, in the past couple of years. And I've tried to get it in different ways. I've tried to do it online. I've tried to do it in hybrid versions, and some things more in person. And it has been fascinating to see the different ways that works and doesn't work, the different ways that you can feel emotionally connected when you're not together, the ways that you can try to write something together. I did a collaborative thing over the summer that just pushed me to feel like, yes, this is something that I want to keep doing. I want to keep storytelling with other people. I want us to be doing it together. I want us to be, I don't want to be doing these things alone. And it's such a privilege to be in a circle with so many artists that I've heard really wonderful things about, that I hold in very high esteem. So I feel very grateful to be here. And I don't know, I hold lot of identities that I care for a lot. I hold a lot of family members with me that I care for a lot, different parts of the world with me. I just feel like I'm growing all the time. I'm excited to grow in this process with all of you.
So my name is Muata, and I use she, her pronouns. And I function right now mostly as a composer, a recording artist, one half of the Muatas, which is our band name. And I don't have a lot of words. The last 3 years have been pretty surreal. I used to be such a chatterbox, but I find myself now really leaning more heavily into those quiet spaces. I think I was always an introvert, but kind of that introvert-extrovert. And I think as an artist, I was always kind of oscillating back and forth too between engaging deeply in community and collaborative spaces and doing my own thing. And now there's a lot of grief and a lot of processing that's taking place on a really deep spiritual level in a way that makes me feel, I can't dance. So I feel such strong gratitude for the ability to express that through music, because I think that this is a time right now where words can't quite capture what it is that I'm feeling and thinking and needing to express and needing even to extract from folks. The most meaningful experiences I've had in the last 2 to 3 years has been nonverbal communication. So that kind of makes it even harder to be living through a pandemic with smiles covered, because sometimes someone's smile can just shift my energy for the rest of the day. It can be just what I need, and I love to be able to give that to people too. So this is different for me. It's different for us to be coming out of our pandemic shell, so to speak, to work with a group of people. But I feel so honored as I look around this room, because everybody in this room is somebody that I respect and somebody who I admire, and I'm looking forward to meeting, working with new people as we go through this process, and just sharing what I have with you all, and being able to create together. In this really critical time that we're in. Again, sorry, I don't have a whole lot of words, not a whole lot of profound things to say, but I'm in a place of deep gratitude to just be here with you in this moment.
My name is Muata, the other half of Muata, musical artist, and I guess, well, first of all, thank you. Just thank you for being, reaching out to us and having us to share the space with you all, able to go on this journey of creating. I'm just grateful to be in the space with so many creators and to create something, work towards creating something collectively. So I just want to say that first. Secondly, storytelling. Many of you have mentioned that already, but I feel that much of life is storytelling, and this is an opportunity to do some storytelling around a particular point in which we all come together in terms of our experience with the pandemic, our experience with the uprising and the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, and living in the same space at the same time where this all happened. I guess the way that I look at what we do, what I do, is, I guess I'm in many ways creating soundtracks for the experiences that we live through. I mean, there's always music in my head. So in this particular period of time, 2020, 2021, the music that was in my head and the music in our heads was giving the soundtrack to all of the different range of human experiences that we were going through. The anger, the sadness, the rage, the grief, the brokenheartedness, the glimmers of hope here and there. And a lot of that comes out in the soundtrack that we create for our experiences. And actually, I found words for it through someone else's words. The pastor of my church, Reverend Elijah McDavid, he said a couple of months ago, there's beauty being birthed in our brokenness. And that really resonated with me and kind of encapsulated kind of what our creative journey has been like since 2020, 2021. That out of that brokenness, we are birthing something beautiful, something that can help tell the story of not only us, but of that experience in South Minneapolis that is still ongoing. And I would just say that Johanna doesn't have a lot of words to say maybe right now, but it's all in the lyrics. So she puts a lot of what she has to say into the lyrics, and I'm not going to say anything else about that. But I just wanted to put that out there in space, you're being honest. But thank you all, and I really look forward to this experience and this collective.
Okay. Well, I'm Darren, writer and filmmaker. And I think for the last couple of years, it's definitely been a disruption. No surprise there. I like what you said, what your pastor said. I agree with that. I think the world needs a lot of healing. And I think there's a silver lining to things. I think, uprising aside, I think of the pandemic. I like to think of the great slowdown as when everybody was isolated and walking in the neighborhood instead of getting on an airplane. I thought, wow, things were really crazy fast a few months ago. And I think it's better for the planet to slow down a little bit. And I also think, as you're racing around having a million conversations, there's a lot of superficiality that seems to have kind of gone by the wayside too. And it seems like things have gotten more slow and more real. So I think there is definitely good things coming out of this time. As far as the uprising, I kind of view that very different because I think, as you said, that there's a certain amount of trauma that I don't think is, speaking for myself, that is not healed yet. It's been a pretty productive time the last couple of years, made a bunch of short films and all that. But I still feel there's something deeper that hasn't been unearthed yet, that still has to be said. And I've been thinking about that, and my writing has really slowed down. I've got, as everybody probably does, have dozens of projects that haven't got finished that just don't seem as important now. Maybe they will again someday, but there's something more important out there that I haven't been able to dig at yet. So that's something that's kind of burdening me. And I'm more of a solo artist too, writer and filmmaker and studio rat. Unlike a live performer, I don't come out of the dark till everything's ready. So live is a scary thing for me. But one can get a little out there without a community. So it's good to be here in this community and working on a project. So thanks for having me.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Day, and I really not quite sure. I kind of dabble with a lot of things. And I think about this time right now, you know, in our oral history, we know that, you know, the earth has cleansed herself, you know, at least 4 times. And when they first started talking about climate change, you know, they said, oh, it'll be 50 years, it'll be 100 years. But in our history, climate change didn't happen in 50 years. It was like that. And we know, you know, if you study the geology, when we walked the Missouri River and we were in Montana, there was a place where the year before they found a 6-foot shark. They found the complete fossil someplace in Washington, D.C. now. If you go to Jefferson petroglyphs, I guess it's our petroglyphs, but named after some white guy, I'm sure. If you go over there in southwestern Minnesota, you'll see all these petroglyphs, and then on the ground there's waves because there was an ocean there. So the earth has cleansed herself a number of times through floods, ice age, and there are always some people that survive. And the Hopi talk about, you know, this being the 4th time they came into the world, and that each time they came into the world, they were, in the beginning, they were given instructions how to live. It was very basic: sing, pray, be grateful, and those simple things they would forget. And the stories always go like this. And there was a time when the people were fighting amongst each other, brother against brother. No one was taking care of the children. That's how the story always goes. And then something happened. And the Creator looked and said, time to cleanse the world and start over. And maybe next time they'll get it right. And so the Hopi say that happened to them 4 times. And then this 4th time, they were on an island. And they made their way back. And they were told to migrate to the east 4 times, to the north 4 times. Don't go over that door, that ice door, they told them. Go to the west till you came to the ocean, and to the south 4 times. And so they began those migrations, and they say the Maya were their relatives who stayed in the south, so on. And on the last migration, they stayed in the desert in Arizona, where every day they would have to pray for rain, so that their corn would grow. Every day they would have to sing those songs. And so that's what they did. And, you know, every tribe has their stories like that. And, you know, because our oral history is probably more accurate than anything that's written in the Bible. Because the Bible's been rewritten so many times. But our oral history is the same. And so I feel like we're in the midst of that right now. That, you know, like we've forgotten our teachings, our original instructions. So simple. Sing, pray, loving and be generous. And if you're not doing those things, then you are indeed doing the opposite. And so I feel like that's where we are. I mean, that's where we are right now. And you know, like the craziness is like really, really crazy. I mean, who could even imagine that 10 years ago that people would be saying the things that they say today?
Mm-hmm.
That they would be doing the things they do today. You know, that we've, you know, like we don't even know how to eat anymore. You know, we don't even know what is good to put in our bodies.
Mm.
Anyhow, so that's, I feel like that's where we are right now. And, you know, the earth has always survived and will probably survive much better without us. We're the only ones that we're the only ones that cannot survive without everything else on the earth. But everything else on the earth can survive just fine without us. Anyhow, so I feel like that's kind of where we're at. I also feel like, you know, like we're in the midst of, you know, many people are in the midst of deep grief, myself included, and trying to figure out a way to process that. Not quite able to write, but it feels good to make drums, to do carving, to paint. But to put pen to paper right now, it seems utterly impossible. So, sorry that's so heavy, but it's kind of where
That's real.
Yeah.
I was actually planning to go to India almost as soon as I came back from India last year, because my mother is to turn 90 last year. So I had made up my mind when I went in 2019 that I would go back at least three or four times a year to see her. And so I was fully planning to go in April or May once our show got over. And even for like just 2 weeks, and then come back and then go back again, just to make sure that I saw her often. And then I didn't know that it would be 2 years that I wouldn't see my mother. And in November 6th, she turned 90 years old. And it was just like, for me, a lot of grief that I wasn't there during that time. And I don't even know, because I know the last time I didn't go for a long time, I went home and I wept for, I don't know, 2 hours or something. So I don't even know what my reaction is going to be when I go back to India. I can't even imagine. But I guess that's for me. I mean, my mother got COVID the year that 2020, I think. Like, so I didn't go, and then she got COVID in that October, and it was very hard because the way people treat COVID in India is very different. I mean, and at that time it was new. So basically, they put a sign outside your door saying that you have COVID, and then nobody comes in, and it's like a scarlet, almost like I don't know. It was just really strange, and I was really frightened. If it hadn't been for my niece who fought with the entire system, she would have ended up in hospital, and that's the worst thing possible because it's once you get into that ventilator, it's just like that's it. So so that was very scary, and I think at the same time, going through what happened with the uprising, going through. Being part of Longfellow Rising, which is the organization and movement really that was created to respond to what happened in Longfellow, being part of all of those meetings with so many people coming from many, many different places was truly a revelation, because I feel like I experienced firsthand what it meant, I mean, I know what gentrification means. You know, I saw these buildings right opposite Benji gentrify. I saw all of that, but then actually being privy to the conversations as gentrification was happening, and privy to what people were doing, like buying up buildings or like waiting for buildings to be destroyed and then say, oh, we're looking for that land, but we're going to wait for a little bit. You know, so really like knowing those conversations that were happening, that actually shifted me as an artist. And when I heard the stories of the people, right outside, like the Gandhi Mahal restaurant that was destroyed, or right, like from the liquor store owner, just listening to the stories of people in that area, mean, I think it was a whole different, it was like really deep grief for me, that listening to those stories of, people who were saved, the people who destroyed property, like having white supremacists go out, right outside our own doors. I mean, many of us have experienced cars going outside our own doors, hiding, taking our garbage in at night, protecting our neighborhood during the day. It just feels like that, I don't know. Somehow that it was such a heightened time, and yet this feels like a heightened time as well with what's happening not only in our own city, but also outside in multiple countries. So I feel like that's what I'm trying to process. I really don't know what to do with that. When I see right-wing leaders happening, whether it's in India or in Brazil I'm just trying to make those connections and with our own city and seeing and figuring out what that means.
It was beautiful to listen to all of you. And something that I just want to hold in the space, both because I think it's so important for us as human beings and also for this work, is that I want that space for things like grief to really be there, and not to be there and then we have to make it okay. Like I feel like there's some kind of process that is so outside of the way that the systems of this country work that don't allow that real space. And when we had the Poetry in the Windows reading in the middle of the incredible hot day in July, but we had like 50 people came and sat out there. And it makes me cry to think about it, but I remember looking up and there was Mr. Bill Cotman sitting in the shade, Beverly, of course, right? Because they were everywhere and they supported art. And but I had so many people come up to me, both people I know and people I don't know, who were just so fed by that. And a lot of those poems are, they were poems of the time. They weren't just happy poems or like everything's going to be fine. And I actually think people having the opportunity to hear from each other, those real things, for me, when someone else says to me, I'm not doing so great, I'm not happy to hear that because I love that person, I don't want them to be struggling. But that honesty really helps me be like, doing so great either, right? Let me remember that and walk with that and be caring about myself and others in that space. So again, I don't know what all this will mean for the work, but I feel like for me, bringing that into the space feels like really important, and what is something positive that that art can do is to speak for people's pain and to speak for those real things, the grief and the trauma, that people have to live with, that people were already living with before COVID and before the uprising, and then the cracks that created, and then the trauma of that time. And there is I had never experienced anything like that in my life, the kind of moment we were in. So I just hold that for us as we go forward, that I want that to be the space that we're in. And I can't help my own personal optimism because I have a 7-year-old and because that's just the way I've always been. But trying to hold the strength of, I feel like the realness of what we arrive at in terms of that. Whether, like you said, whether we get to a place where there's healing. I think there's healing in what we're doing. I think there's healing just us being in this room together, in the real kind, maybe not the easy kind. And to me, it was, last week was 13 years since my mother passed over and became an ancestor, and I just was really sitting with what grief is, and that grief is just an incredible thing to walk with, and you walk with it in different ways at different times, but I just wanted to honor that because I heard a lot of grief in what people were sharing, and I think that's super important.
I was listening to the radio on my way over here, and they said like 800,000 people in the United States have died of COVID. And I think about like um, you know, for indigenous people, you know, we were like 50 million. And 1900, we were 2 within the United States. It was 50 million North, Central, South America. And we had been removed to small reservation land bases, couldn't support the people, couldn't sustain the people. And I think there must have been like a tremendous depression amongst the people, right? And so I think about like, well, how did they come out of that? Because they, you know, it was the policy always was genocide, extermination, and then finally assimilation, right? Mm-hmm. So how did we come out of that, right? But I know it's not just indigenous people. I mean, you look across the world and, you know, the things that happen to other peoples in all the continents, really, you know, going through those wars and famines and, you know, people trying to obliterate them. Like how, like what is within the human spirit that, because we're pretty much there today, you know. I mean, I don't know how they did it, but people have survived and always trying to make life better, right? To make life better. So, but I think those are also the similarities amongst people of color, is that sadly we all share that, and as well as people from Europe. I mean, I can't remember how many witches and lesbians they murdered, and men, gay men, they murdered in Europe as well. So, but there's something, you know, that, I mean, can you imagine that, like 50 million people and then there'd be like 2 million left, you know, like, and forced into these camps, right? These really, and yet, today, there's radical resurgence in culture amongst indigenous people in North, Central, and South America.
It's a gift just to have these moments with you right now. I don't know that I'll ever see you again. We take it for granted, you know, the breath that we have in this moment, that it's going to be there in the next moment. We don't actually know that. But as I'm just in this room, just surveying and just taking it in, it's like there's just something that feels so beautiful about just sharing this physical space with each and every one of you right now. And I just wanted to share that. And yeah.
I do know this is a time of great ferment when contradictions show themselves, when, you know, we have to make the best in and think completely in different ways. So yes, and I do love to see, you know, when I see my neighbors, I do feel lovely, and I used to, like, I couldn't stand all the Christmas stuff because I was like, oh my God. But I love the lights. I'm like, yes, thank you.
Were gonna say that.
Thank you. Thank
I
you
feel
for the
like
lights.
right.
I think Ananya has done a lot to create rituals at this time.
I have,
Because it's
yeah.
like,
I have.
every time I go there, it's like another ritual that's happening. But I think that's beautiful too, because I feel like one of the things we're doing is also because of what's happening in other countries, we're rejecting that an old way of doing things. I mean, what feels not right, and kind of creating our own in some ways.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how over the past couple of years I have felt like there has been no option but to try and heal trauma. Like that I've been, and I'm speaking like from myself, like I've been pushed to a point where there's nothing else I can do but try to find ways to care for myself and find ways to survive and get through days. And this is, and I feel like something that, like, as dark as that is, there is something about the time that we're in where it feels more apparent to me now than it ever has before that, like, there's so much healing happening at once, you know? Like, you heal something in yourself, and you heal something for your mother. Like, you heal something for yourself, and you heal something for, I don't know, anybody who